Good morning, Realtors. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jay Rinehart. I'm a Realtor from Rock Hill, South Carolina, and serve as the NAR Federal Political Coordinator for my Congressman and my friend, Ralph Norman. I'm also your Region 4 RVP this year.
Thank you, Jay. My name is Owen Tyler, and I'm from Charleston, and I serve as your 2020 President for South Carolina Realtors. Today, we're honored to have Congressman Norman here and thank him for his leadership in Washington, D.C. and his continued support of the real estate industry and homeownership.
Thank you, Owen. May is that time of the year when we look forward to attending the NAR Legislative Meetings in our nation's capital, but obviously due to the coronavirus, we're conducting these meetings virtually. It's one of my favorite Realtor meetings of the year, and I've spoke to many of you about that, and I hate that we can't be together, but we now have this opportunity to share this discussion with all 24,000 Realtors in our state and locally with individuals that have not been to Washington before. So for our members who are watching, I hope our conversation today inspires you to attend next year's meetings when hopefully we'll be right back in Washington in front of the Congressman.
I completely agree, Jay. You know, normally we have about 125 Realtors from South Carolina, and we're appreciative of that. But today, to open it up to 24,000 members is a really special thing. And I'm sure Congressman Norman is excited to be here with us. The Congressman's on a tight schedule. So if it's okay with him and you, I think we'll just kind of jump into the questions now. Congressman, are you ready?
I'm ready. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you all for hosting this.
Wonderful. As the United States continues to grapple with COVID-19 crisis, we're monitoring a number of issues across the country and in South Carolina that are impacting homeowners, the real estate industry, the health of our mortgage industry, and just generically the American consumer anywhere. Some things you may or may not know, there are 9.5 million jobs in real estate. That includes rental and the leasing industry. And for every 2 home sales, it generates 1 job in the United States. Congressman, we urge you to consider these facts as you're thinking about additional legislation that might come out that ensure that the American consumer is protected, home ownership is protected, commercial property ownership is protected. And we understand that the difficult sacrifices that you're making during this time, having to be away from your family and your loved ones, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it's my honor to do so. And I'm a Realtor. I've been in the real estate world for, I guess, 45 years now. And the company still is involved with mainly commercial real estate. But up here in Washington, D.C., I will tell you, your voice is heard. I always look forward to seeing the Realtors when they come up. I urge you to keep very active, because as politicians, we don't know what we don't know. Even though I'm in the business, I understand how it affects those on the home front, the doing the deals, and where the rubber meets the road. And having your voice, the Realtor's voice, means so much. You know, we've got a lot of issues. As you know, I'm heading back tomorrow. We'll be voting on a package that is over $30 trillion. The financial health of the country is at stake. I hope we don't pass this, but it's something that we're going that Ms. Pelosi and her group are going to put up. But the financial solvency is at stake, and hopefully we can defeat it, if not in the Senate, with the president's veto.
Ralph, with the CARES Act having provided some relief to taxpayers and small businesses, I think you'd agree that it's been a bumpy road. You and I have talked about that, you know, at a meeting we had just recently. But what's the next? I mean, you were just alluding to what's in this funding package, but what should Congress do next to help move us forward, both economically, but also address the health issues?
Well, the CARES package, the first 2 were the right thing at the right time. I backed the president. No one expected the pandemic that we had. This came out of left field. It'll be 66 days that South Carolina will have had its doors shut, the businesses, I mean. A couple of issues, Jay. One, we don't have the money. we didn't have before. And this added $3 trillion that we're looking at, it came out late yesterday. And you know, we have got to hopefully defeat this. This has nothing to do with the coronavirus. It's got bailout for the pensions. It's got bailout money for the every government in the country. And again, we need to be back in Washington, D.C. having budget meetings, which I'm on, to try to figure out where's this money going to come from? Where are we going to cut? And South Carolina's got to do the same thing. Every state in the union is going to have to figure out, you know, what they can do to pay for the expenses that they've had. No state can cover what each state is facing. We've had 450,000 unemployment claims filed in South Carolina. To give you a benchmark, last year, when the economy, we had basically 2% unemployment, we had a total of 120,000. In the first 4 or 5 months, we've got 450,000. So the bottom line, I'm hoping that we're going to go back tomorrow and Miss Pelosi's got all the power. If your listeners hadn't followed it, Speaker of the House has got a tremendous amount of power. The only one that can call us back into session is the Speaker of the House. And I hopefully we'll go back on the subcommittees and figure out what we're going to do. This isn't business as usual. The new normal in this country is going to be, from a legislative standpoint, get the House solvent, getting this country solvent where we pay our bills, and then having priorities in place, which is one of the biggest things that we have got to have the spine to do. I've got a letter from one of the mayors who's asking, I understand why, but he's got infrastructure issues that the city had. And, you know, if every state does that, then it's just going to further burden the debt in this country, which is hovering at $28 trillion. So anyway, I think it's time for us to go to work. It's time for us to go back to Washington, D.C. Jay, we're still getting a paycheck, which we hadn't been up. We've been up in Washington doing the work of the people for 10 days over the last 2 months, which is unacceptable. That's a long-winded answer, but.
No, I appreciate that. It's
okay. I think the sentiment for a lot of our members is to get back to work and to have a country that's solvent. And that's a very difficult thing today. And I think it has seemed like a very lofty goal, but we at some point have to do it. Realtors support HR 6463, which is Securing and Enabling Commerce Using Remote and Electronic Notarization Act of 2020. Yes, I have that written on my screen so I can remember it. And that is the remote notary bill. And we believe this is a crucial piece of legislation to keep the real estate markets functioning and prevent any interruption should something like this happen again. It allows for a nationwide use of remote notary. We have tried in South Carolina to get that through the General Assembly and have been unsuccessful. We're asking for support on that. There's a Senate companion bill, 3533. Can we get your support on remote notary? Do you have a thought on remote notary?
Absolutely. Here's the battle you're going to be having. And I've just heard just very little, but briefly I've heard that you've got groups fighting it. It's amazing that South Carolina hasn't passed this. But with remote notary, you are affecting some people who have jobs who it's a financial issue for them. But again, this is a new normal. I would dare anyone to come up with any rational reason why that's not, why it doesn't make sense. Now, I'm sure they're going to bring up security, which that can be addressed. And I don't know what the response has been, but this is where the realtors need to get with their individual reps. I will get other co-signers on the bill itself and get our delegation out of the 7. I know we can get 5. Maybe 6 with Joe Cunningham. You would have more influence with him, Owen, down there to speak with him about that. But probably Joe would sign, but I'm sure the others would. But everything is a heavy lift now, but that doesn't mean we don't try. The other thing's flood insurance. I asked the realtors, we've got to come up with some solutions on flood insurance. It's vital to any loan closing. Jay, you know, it's always been an issue on the federal level. But I would ask all the realtors to look into it enough, and the leaders in leadership to adjust it and cut the things out that are either outdated, that should have been sunsetted, that we can get it solvent. It's not solvent, and it's just one of the issues that realtors will have a direct impact.
Great. Thank you for your support on that, Ralph. That's a big issue here in South Carolina, and as an attorney also, I see no reason why we should not have that.
No, and do this, Jay. One of the most effective, and we've talked about this, get a group of realtors. It doesn't matter how many, and call a meeting with your local reps and just say, like I did last night, I had a group of 10 people, just want to talk issues. That's very effective. And Owen and Charleston, get your people together, you know, just get any number that you can, and then say we'd like to have a amiable conversation about the notary bill or about anything else that you'd like to discuss. That goes a long way. There's something about a meeting, getting together, and you can social distance. Last night we social distances with 6 feet apart, but now is effective as anything else that I could think of.
Yes, sir.
Great advice. Thank you.
NAR has joined a broad coalition of organizations that are representing the financial industry and affordable housing advocates that are calling on government regulators right now to provide a liquidity facility for single family and multifamily servicers. I'm sure you've heard about this, so that they can manage this period of forbearance that was in the CARES Act. Such a facility would assist mortgage servicers with their additional capacity to address both homeowners and renters impacted by this pandemic.
Well, my opinion, I haven't heard that much about it as far as specifically. What I would say is make sure that it's specific on what it asks for, and when it says help the you know, the financiers, exactly what does that mean? Where would I assume the money come from within the CARES Act? I know there was a part of it that was in the last bill we voted for, I think.
Well, let's talk just for a second. Oh, and I'm gonna go ahead with this if you don't mind.
Sure.
Right now, the current provisions in the CARES Act are confusing for like a property manager. So for us, we're you know, South Carolina opens up evictions on May the 15th. The problem is that now we have to certify that any eviction we do is not backed by a government-backed loan, because under the CARES Act, those renters cannot be evicted until August. So when we went to look at both the CFPB website, the information that's been put out, and the CARES Act, it says any loan that has been sold to Fannie or Freddie is FHA, VA, or USDA guaranteed. So now, how do we find that when we manage single family rentals? There's nothing out there that shows me that. And then at the same time, now if my owners cannot go in and evict, or if there's not a foreclosure otherwise, then what do those owners do? Well, they go to their servicer and they ask for forbearance. Well, now the servicer is put in a position to where they still have to pay the investor, but they have no money coming in. So that's where this is all coming up. It's something that just kind of the wave just kind of crashed without any of us knowing that it was coming.
Yeah, and it's the same way with commercial bank loans. The hoteliers all over this country who dropped from 80% occupancy, particularly down in Charleston, and down to 10%. You can't pay the irrigation on a lawn maintenance with 10% occupancy. So, and the forbearance with commercial bank loans is not there. The minute you're basically in default, as in what you're talking about with renters and property managers, you can't evict those who can't, who don't pay the rent. I think it's through the end of August, isn't it, Jay?
Under the CARES Act, yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, on the specifics of it, just get down. Let's just see. I'll be glad to try to help you with it. You know, this whole CARES Act is the best description I've heard. It's like building an airplane and taking off at the same time.
Right.
And there are a lot of loopholes like this, and a lot of people are not getting paid. The commercial tenants, a lot of us are not getting income. So we're just gonna have to work through it. The forbearance, we need to be able to explain to lenders and to the borrowers to see, you know, if that's in their mortgage. And it is on some of it. On the, again, commercial back loans is not. So I'll be glad, our office will be glad to help you with that.
As you're looking, sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious, Congressman, as a follow-up, do you think that forbearance should be kind of a mandated thing through legislation? I know that a lot of the forbearance discussion has been, we recommend that the lender allow the forbearance, and we recommend these things, and we recommend that it doesn't come back and negatively affect the credit of the person who holds the mortgage. And you're correct. I mean, the reality is that for a lot of businesses that are closed down, they can't pay their rent, and the landlord can't pay that. In South Carolina, a lot of the residential rental properties that are owned are 1- and 2-man types of things, where I own one house. That's my future investment. That's my retirement. You know, I'm 40 years old, so I go buy a house and I rent that out, and I'm going to sell that in 20 years, and I'm going to use that to my retirement. I just wonder if you think, and we've heard a varying different degree. I just want you to know we've heard from one end of the other in these meetings about what people think about a mandated forbearance through legislation.
It's not going to happen because we're not going to meet. I mean, in other words, I would say it would have a chance if we were meeting. I understand we're flying back tomorrow, voting one day on Friday and coming back. We don't know when we're going to come back in.
Yeah.
So the chance of getting it through the House, the Senate, the president would probably, I don't know how he would react on that. He would look at it, or his people would. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, you know, the flip side of it, Owen, is, and I know in the commercial real estate, all these hotels that have heavy debt with no forbearance, the language just isn't there. Mm-hmm. What's the lender going to do? What are they going to do? Foreclose on all of it? The bankruptcy costs, and Jay, you know this, those that declare bankruptcy, go figure how they're going to pay for that. Right. And so the banks have got, there is a lever with, I think, trying to work with them and saying, look, you and I both know a lot of property owners, both commercial and residential. They got a lot of property. Does a bank really want to take that task of foreclosing when you're going to be dealing with bankruptcy costs? You're going to be dealing with all this property. What are they going to do with it? And are they going to get, what percent of the value are they going to get? So that's probably, with this late date, we're what, midway through 2020. It probably would be a great time to sit down with the lender, with the commercial backers of the loans, just to see, is there a person we could talk with to walk through this and to see what options are available.
That's really great advice for the members that are listening to tell their clients, because what we don't want to create is a liquidity crisis within our mortgage industry. So thank you for those comments, Congressman. Jay?
But I tell you another thing, Owen and Jay, these banks have got to consider, I don't care how many properties you take over from non-payment, somebody's got to run them. And tell me who has the liquidity to buy properties now. And, you know, I don't know what cap rates are, you know, what a cap rate should be now. Hotels that were selling for 4% now, and I guess you'd be in the 15 double digits, which, you know, nobody, this pandemic has turned the appraisal world upside down, and lenders have to be aware of that.
Yes, sir. And Congressman, I think our position on this is, as you are looking at these bills, and if there is a provision in there regarding helping fund the liquidity that will help a bank not have to go through the foreclosure. So on the servicing, we would just encourage you to please look at that and really study that, or figure out a way that there could be some support so that we don't have that foreclosure and the liquidity crisis.
And let me ask this: if you could get me the pros and cons of what you're hearing on the ground.
Okay.
You know, we get stuck in Washington. We don't really have a handle on the everyday, I guess, workout that realtors are having. Get us, as an elected official, I need to know what I'm going to hear on the both sides. Get us that so that we can, when we go to get signatures on letters or try to pass legislation, if we do go back into session, then we'll have both sides of the coin that we can discuss.
Yes, sir. We'll take care of that. Oh, and you want to go with the SALT?
Yeah, so Congressman, realtors support HR 5377, which is related to increasing the deduction to $20,000 for married couples. For those of our members that are watching that aren't familiar, I'm gonna give just a quick background. I know you know what it is, but SALT caps state and local taxes and in effect penalizes married couples who file jointly. And it's created some economic hardship in the middle class families across not only South Carolina, but the United States. That limit is currently at $10,000 in state and local deductions, whether the household is composed of a single individual or two married individuals filing jointly. NAR believes that an increase to $20,000 for joint returns will help bridge that difference and concentrate efforts on those that most need it. There's a companion bill in the Senate to the House bill. Do you have some thoughts on that? Is that a bill that you could support?
It was a real contentious, that bill was very contentious with those that had high and SALT state and local taxes. You know, the Illinois of the world, the Chicagos, the California, who really got hurt by this. You know, I didn't like the interest deduction cap. They almost took out 1031 exchanges. We fought, and as Kevin Brady told me, he said, "Now, Ralph, if you're going to single out every single thing that you feel like should be in it, then we're not going to have a bill. We got to start somewhere." What I would be interested in looking at is to see the financial analysis of that. If you raise it from 10,000 to 20,000, which that's going to help, but now we're going to hear a banner of states saying we need to take the limits off. Anybody, those states that have high taxes ought to be able to deduct the total amount. Now, 20,000 could be a happy medium that we'd look at, but what I would ask the realtors to do, let's see what effect that has on the budget, where I can go to Kevin Brady and said, what do you think about this? If we raise it, you know, the additional 10,000, how is this going to affect, and what are we going to have to offset this with that we may have contention with? I will tell you, the high tax states, and we're lucky here in South Carolina, but most states, you got property owners, and y'all know this, that are paying property taxes, particularly on your resort areas, on up of $50,000 to $80,000, depending on the value of the house. So I would look at it, but let's see the financial impact so that, again, the writers of the bill could see how it's going to affect the total income.
Congressman, to address that one and go on to our next question, I would encourage you to think too, one of the things that we're starting to see, which is a migration out of those high tax states into a state like South Carolina, and what impact that would have both in our district, but also in the lower cost states as we move forward. And all of a sudden that burden is shifted from a high tax state to a lower tax state, and what would have to happen locally with increase in taxes because of the increase in our population.
Yeah, exactly.
The next question I've got is kind of an interesting one, because it's a capital gains question. You know as well as I do, especially in our district, the amount of rental homes has gone up significantly, and the amount of investors from outside of our area, because we're in a attractive location for people to come, they're coming in and they're buying houses that would have originally been in the marketplace for first-time home buyers. They're taking them out of that market, putting them into a rental, and then putting a big pressure on those first-time home buyers, which of course is increasing our prices. It's doing a lot of crazy things. We're suggesting and encouraging that maybe there's a tax incentive that could be given to owners of single-family rental homes or condos. When they sell it to a first-time home buyer or an owner occupant of that house that the capital gains rate is cut in half. So if they're on a 20% capital gains rate, it would be cut to 10. Well, that 10% as an incentive could really move the needle with the amount of inventory that we have in our area and in South Carolina. What do you think about that plan?
Anytime it's giving money back to the taxpayers, I like that, particularly when it comes to the real estate industry, which is the heartthrob of this country. So goes housing, so goes the economy. Yeah, I would favor looking at that, and that would be a real incentive that affects people directly, particularly the first-time home buyer. The only thing I would add to that we need to couple with this legislation is, and this is going to have to be done on a state-by-state basis. I went by a subdivision, a lot had been cleared. It was a level lot, no issues with the grade. To get it to the point, which was basically scraping the top of the lot, the owner just happened to come by and he was shaking his head. It took him 6 weeks to get a permit. It took him as all in on the price of scraping the lot to get it ready for the footings ended up like 25 to 30% of the cost of the house. We as realtors need to start looking and get into the details of the regulations that are driving up, for cost for first-time home buyers. Now, you've got your normal lumber cost, all the components that go into both residential and construction. We need to take the time to get a committee together, and I will be glad to help on this, because I said, are you serious? The house he was building was in the $806,000 to $800,000 range, but the lot was to have that kind of cost to even get to the basis is ridiculous, and we need to start in a nice way, start waving our hands and saying, this is what's preventing that first-time couple who is married, who wants to try to buy a home. This is the barriers that we're facing, and make them explain where the cost is going. So I will be glad. That would be a worthwhile endeavor, but again, it's going to take some effort and some work. And as I told the group last night, the biggest thing I face in Congress is just complacency. People want elected officials to do it. Those of all of us on the ground can do a far better job of knowing the details. The biggest question we can ask is why? Why this regulation? Why this cost? Then we can put it back into the hands of the home buyer, which is the heartthrob of this country. So with the capital gains reduction for first-time home buyers, I like. Let's couple it with getting that initial base cost down. And for those regulations that make sense, promote them. Those that are just bureaucracy, fight it.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to switch topics from tax now, as exciting as tax is. One of the big questions we get from our membership is healthcare. It's no surprise to you that most realtors in the state of South Carolina are independent contractors. Nearly 2/3 obtain their health coverage either from a spouse who is not an independent contractor, Medicare, or Affordable Care Act. Another 10 to 15% of our members are uninsured. For years, we have been after association health plans, which would offer a more affordable or a higher quality healthcare than our members can get, and ensure coverage, we believe, throughout. Is there anything you can help us with this effort for the health plans for associations?
One of the things I'm excited about is working on affordable health care. Obamacare didn't do it. The phrase, you can keep your doctor, well, that was not right. We've got to come up with we've got to come up with workable solutions so that contractor can get insurance. The average American cannot even afford to get sick, much less if he does, he's going to pay it through higher premiums. The doctors are fed up. We've got in fact, we ought to have another webinar. I've got the RSC committee handbook on healthcare that the Heritage Foundation has signed off on. It makes it, particularly with telemedicine now, it's using the latest technology, and it's really a great plan that I would like do another event like this and spell out how they're making it competitive, how transparency with the realtors or anybody knowing what they're paying for. I couldn't tell you when I go to a hospital, try analyzing a bill. When you get a bill, try analyzing where it goes. Kind of like I was talking about with the regulations on construction. But no, we've got to work on it. Now we have got to fight. You got a strong contingency in the House now with the control that Ms. Pelosi has. They want government-run health care. That they want to filter through government. It has not worked with Obamacare. It will not work here. So we'll be fighting that. But the first step is that we can show you the basis of this new plan that makes a lot of sense. Most of the 192 Republicans have bought off on it and agreed to it. But the option of not doing anything is not an option. We've got to do something. Healthcare is as y'all know, what can you do when you're sick? Very little, in particular with what we're facing with the pandemic. But the basics of it are transparency, knowing what you pay for, letting the patient pick what he wants in his plan. I mean, go over the health plan for the state. You got all this mandated coverage from chiropractic care to maternity care. Well, a lot of us don't need maternity care. A lot of us don't want to pay for various coverages. That's what we need. We need to get a streamlined plan, just like we do with the housing world. You pick a house based on what you need. We should pick a health plan based on what we need. And that's the only way this is going to work. And we've got to get the doctors on board, which I think we can do.
Congressman, what about the infrastructure? The funding for Fixing America's Surface Transportation, the FAST Act, expires September 30th. With y'all not acting, then that's the federal surface transportation spending and reauthorization that would move forward. With y'all not being in Washington, where do you see that going? Because as you know, driving around South Carolina, it's pretty easy within your district to see that the roads are not great.
Get this, Jay and Owen. I went through a company that called me here in York County, and they make the equipment to go under bridges and assess the structure of bridges. I actually got on the platform. We looked at a mock-up of a bridge. They showed me pictures of bridges that you and I drive on every day. It will scare you to death. And I hope it's not going to take an accident to bring us to our senses. But the president has tried to float the idea of an infrastructure package, and then you get into the details. You got certain congressmen that want broadband for their particular state is more important. That's the infrastructure that they need. In South Carolina, we need roads and bridges before something happens. If you talk to your municipality, they want infrastructure for water and sewer plants. So everything, the devil is in the details. But the good news is, from what the president has laid out initially, and I tell every municipality in my district to get together your plan of what you need. Like there's a lot of land that's being dedicated for a mega site. Get together what you need to make that site viable, and get together what you're going to have equity to put in the deal. This president, and I like this is not going to be based on, to the extent possible, on politics. It's going to be, show me the rate of return on a mega site in Sumter, as an example, or Charleston. What do you need to make it viable? And show me what industry that you can get that will bring a return on the investment that the federal dollars go into. That makes perfect sense to me. And is it perfect? No. And I get a lot of kickback when they say, well, I don't have any money to put into it. That's the way you need to be planning for that, particularly now. It's the new normal now. Everybody's income is affected. So the states are going to have to come up with a plan. But this president is able and willing to allocate dollars and we got to figure out where it's coming from. But $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion, and then the devil will be in the details on who gets what and what's more important. And I hope it's block granted per state, because every state is different. The tunnels in New Jersey are probably as dilapidated as a lot of the bridges we have here. So I hope it's block granted, and I hope there's strings attached that takes the politics out of it as much as possible, and that the dollars that go into it are hard bid projects. You're not paying any extra just because it's federal dollars. You're driving a hard bargain to protect the taxpayers' dollars. So that's what I would say. Is anything going to be done this year? No. Any win by this president, by the majority in control, it's not going to happen. We could have had it 2 years ago, but the last 3 years, as y'all know, it's impeachment, get him out of office, and now this pandemic hit. The good news is I think it will be front and center stage if the president gets reelected, and if we put forward our plan. South Carolina has got a story to tell. As you mentioned, Jake, California lost 140,000 people last quarter. Why? The taxes are taking all of their money. They're coming here in North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia. So I think we're in perfect shape. That's the good news. But we got to manage it. Growth is good, but it's got to be managed.
Thank you, Congressman. What are you hearing from experts, and maybe you're hearing the same thing that we are? When will this crisis end? I think that it's fair to say that the majority of America is living in fear from the pandemic, and that, you know, we're not just changing our habits to a slight new normal, but a drastic change. And what do you think will restore American confidence? What will get the economy up and running again?
We got to open our doors. You know, if you look back, the president took action in January to stop flights from China, people coming in, other than people that live in America. There is a point, Owen, that the cure is worse than the disease. Now look in South Carolina, and Governor McMaster has done a great job. This thing, I think he issued 16 executive orders. He gradually shut down the things that should have been shut down. And I think it started March 13th. Everything should open up on the 18th of May. That's 66 days. But the biggest confidence boost will put people back to work. Americans are built to work. And it's time to do that. And the new normal is going to be using common sense, which in government, I will be honest with you, common sense isn't so common in a lot of cases. So when you and I go back to work, are we going to be aware of washing our hands? Yes. Are we going to be aware of being, having some distance from the next person? Yes. Are we going to be more aware of, washing your steering wheel down? And, awareness, but it's common sense. But you can only do without oxygen for so long. And the oxygen, we're running low on oxygen as it relates to the economy. The biggest thing I hear, let me go back to work. Because even if we go back next Monday on the 18th, it will have been 66 days that we pretty much throttled it back. It's going to take 45 days to 60 days to ramp back up. I was in a chloroplast. They make the electrical wiring for cars. Guess where a lot of their parts come from? China. We're at war with China. We're at war with China in a lot of different ways. But the good news about all this, Americans now realize the cheap sweatshop labor from China is not so cheap. And it's a new day and a new normal. I'm very aware of the products I buy, and I want them American made. I want the repatriation of people back in this country, because look at what it's cost us, both in financially, but look what the toll that it's taken on our people. And who would have thought of this? But there's good news around the corner, and opening the doors up, which this government has done as of next Monday on most businesses, will be great.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Congressman, my last question. The CARES Act funding was tremendous. I mean, it really was. Do you know how much went to the real estate sector in South Carolina?
Do not.
Okay. What about the United States? Have you heard any statistics on that?
No, and what's interesting, Jay, I mean, you know, the numbers we were told was anywhere from 3 to 6 trillion. We already owe 24, so it puts it near 30. But they put language, and this is a good thing, where any of this information is FOIable. In other words, if a company got dollars, you can FOIA the information to see. And they had questions that, can you really justify that this has had a dramatic impact on your income? And you better be able to explain it. A lot of companies sent the money back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of the dollars, we need to get it before any more money is allocated. We need to get a handle on what's left. The CARES Act on both the first and the second package, a lot of the money hadn't been spent. A lot of the people have it in escrow because they haven't needed it, which is a good thing. So we need to get a handle on where the money is. And then as legislators, I need to tell people in the 5th district, this is how we're going to get the money, or these are going to be the adjustments going forward that I'm going to support, because it's priorities. The military, it was an article in the paper early this morning about how they're going to have to cut back. Well, the military is not one of the areas I want to have to cut back on. Make meaningful cuts, but we got a nation that's not protected is a nation that has had problems. So we need to get a handle on where the money is and how much is left and who's using it for what.
Thank you, Congressman.
Congressman, we are running out of time, and we want to be respectful of your schedule because we appreciate your time today. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our Realtor members watching?
Yeah, you know, the Realtors you're the heart, the heartbeat of the country. So goes housing, so goes the economy. The only thing I would ask you to do is stay active. The two of you are active, but get your members active. Politicians don't know what we don't know, and have these meetings. I can't tell you how important that is, to call your congressman and have a meeting. And let's have another statewide meeting on the health care, because we're one of those states that the 5.2 million people, give it another year, we're going to have 6.2 million. It's going to grow, is my point. And we got to have affordable health care. Let's involve the doctors. And I would love to present this plan that I think y'all will like, being business people.
Thank you, Congressman Norman. On behalf of Jay and myself and our 24,000 commercial and residential members of South Carolina Realtors, we just want to thank you for your diligence and determination during these difficult times, and the hard work you've done for us in the past. You have been a friend to the Realtors, and we appreciate that. You're not just a friend to the Realtors. I think you're a friend to everyone in the state of South Carolina, and that says a lot about an elected official. Please convey our thanks to your staff, both locally in South Carolina and in DC. They involve us and keep us as a part of the conversation. And that is a key thing in affecting change. And know that your leadership is appreciated across the state. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today, and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.